This is TWiT.
And we're here with Dr. Carlos Bandenas, who is a professor of astronomy in the Kenneth B. Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Pittsburgh. I'll get this right yet. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Well, we're very pleased to have you here. And of course, as I mentioned, I just had to invite you because I saw this great article about an upcoming visible nova, which is not something we get to see very often.
Nova! That is true. That is true. It's quite rare, actually.
Tarek, you sound like you just stepped out of Planet of the Apes. Thanks for that.
I was just saying, yeah, I'm excited. It's explosive stuff we're talking about. So
oh, good grief.
It is fun to blow things up, yeah.
Well, that's true. And if you have the power to blow up stars, that's really quite special. So I guess before we go on with this, we probably ought to tell everybody what a nova is and why it's different than a supernova.
Okay. So I guess one way to answer that question would be to just go for the definition. So a nova is a type of binary system. So you have two stars, and one of the two stars is actually a white dwarf. So it's a dead core of a star that has exhausted its nuclear fuel. And white dwarfs are very dense and very small. And sometimes when this binary system exchanges mass, so the star that's not a white dwarf is dumping mass on the white dwarf, this mass accumulates. This is mostly hydrogen, and under certain conditions this can ignite and get a lot of light, and this is what we call a nova explosion. The reason it's different from a supernova is that has to do more with the history of how these things were discovered. Historically, the first use of the word nova actually just means new in Latin. And that's a term that was coined by this astronomer in the 1500s called Tycho Brahe.
Oh, I was going to ask you about him.
Yes. So Mr. Brahe found a new star. He went out one day at night and he recognized that there was a star in the sky that was not there the night before. He wrote about this extensively. He wrote a book called De Stella Nova, which means about the new star. And from the point of view of the phenomenology, it's very similar, right? It's something that is dim and then becomes very bright. It was not until the 20th century and we started getting better at measuring the distances to things, which allows you to work out how intrinsically bright they really are, that we saw there were two different classes of these new stars. There were the regular novae, which we call novae today, and they're the ones that are very, very bright, which we call supernovae. From the point of view of the physics, the difference is that in a nova explosion, the star typically survives. So the white dwarf, nothing serious happens to the white dwarf. It's still there, and it has a chance to accumulate more material and then explode again, perhaps. Supernovae are different in that they blow the star to smithereens, and that it can happen only once.
And forgive me if I misunderstood it, but for these like white dwarf binary systems, are they both white dwarfs, or is it like? So I'm not sure if I missed that earlier. So
no. In your run-of-the-mill novae or novae, like Tycho Borealis, the one that's that may get bright enough to see with the naked eye in the next weeks or months. The other star, the star that is contributing the mass, what we call the mass donor in the jargon, is a normal star.
Okay, so and that can be like any type of star. It could from run of the mill, or
they're usually red giants, which means they have an extended convective envelope, but they can be main sequence stars too. So anything that can contribute hydrogen and put it like on the surface of the white dwarf.
So just to be clear for our listeners, as you just described, there's the supernova stars, right? The star explosions where it destroys a star. Hopefully it doesn't happen to our sun. I don't think it's gonna, right?
It's physically impossible for our sun to explode as a supernova. So we're
great.
Very safe.
That's great. And the way that I was trying to describe to my daughter, like what this nova like concept is it's like these two friends, that are at a buffet, and one just keeps feeding the other one until it like bursts and says, "Hey, have some more," and then keeps feeding it again until it bursts. I mean, is that about accurate to say?
That's about it. There's actually a very interesting physical reason why these explosions happen, and that's the white dwarfs are what we call degenerate objects. They are supported against gravitational collapse by something called degenerate electron pressure. It is a quantum mechanical effect. And they behave in strange ways. So typically, for instance, when you dump a lot of material onto a white dwarf, you try to make the white dwarf more massive, it actually shrinks, which is not the way matter is supposed to behave, right? And one of the features of this degenerate material is that it doesn't generate pressure when you heat it up. In normal matter, what we call an ideal gas, when you heat up a gas, it makes more pressure. This is, anyone who's done a little bit of cooking understands that, right? But white dwarfs don't work like that. And then because of this kind of quirk of white dwarf material, you can have what we call a thermonuclear runaway, which is kind of a self-sustaining nuclear reaction. Mm-hmm. Thermonuclear runaways are very bad news if you're nearby. It generates a lot of energy very, very fast. And this is what makes novae bright, okay? And also some types of supernovae, the thermonuclear ones.
So the analogy that occurs to me for the particular nova we're talking about, which is...
we should mention what we're talking about.
Yeah, you took my name away when you
it's
wrote the
right.
question.
It's right there. It's right here.
Where?
It's right underneath where you are.
It's called T
Corona.
T Coronae Borealis.
Thank you. I just see TCRB.
Yeah.
So a rough analogy in my simple-minded terms, which is probably why I didn't finish my astronomy degree, is if I went on a 160-year cruise on a cruise ship and just spent my entire time in the cafeteria eating, and then every 80
years.
Every 80 years, I have this momentary shudder where I shed a bunch of mass and an explosion of light and then could sit down and start eating again. I would be sort of like this nova star. So let's talk about this one in particular. So it has a repeatable cycle, which I gather from what you've written is very predictable. I mean, literally down to within weeks.
Yes. So as far as we understand, most novae work in this way. Okay, you have the white dwarf, it accumulates material from the other star, a critical condition is met, and then it blows up. Now, there's a subclass of novae, which we call recurrent novae. And the only reason we call them recurrent novae is because they repeat on timescales that are shorter than the typical human lifespan. In reality, all novae may be recurrent. But, if the recurrence time is something like 6,000 years, we just wouldn't know. But this one we know. This one went off in 1946. So it's kind of due for a blow up. And the people who study it, and here, shout out to the people in the amateur astronomers associations that monitor variable stars, because they do great work. So the people who collect data on the nova are saying that it's starting to do the things that typically happen just before the explosion. There's usually a slight brightening and then a dip, and then it blows up. And it just had the dip, and I think in April. So it should blow up between now and September. We don't know exactly when. It can't predict it accurately, but it should happen soon.
And what's the reddening prior to the explosion from?
Reddening?
Yeah. Oh, I thought you said it got a little redder before.
No, it gets a little brighter, and then it has some dimming. I may have said reddening, but it gets a little bright and then a little dim, and then it blows up. And that's where everyone's like waiting now for it to happen. And this one is special because it happens to be one of the closest recurrent novae to us. So what that means is that it's going to get pretty bright. It's actually going to get naked eye bright.
Oh.
So around magnitude 2. And if you know how to find Coronae Borealis, it's a circumpolar constellation, so you can see it at night from a reasonably dark place in the northern hemisphere most nights. What's going to happen is that you will see literally what the namesake of the phenomenon is. You'll see a new star in Coronae Borealis, about as bright as the other stars in Coronae Borealis. So, and it will get bright and stay bright for maybe a few weeks and then fade away.
So, Tarek, I've decided, since I'm not patient enough to wait for Artemis 3 to land to get that Star Trek chair, you and I are going to spend all our nights outside looking, hoping to catch it the minute it happens.
We can place bets. We should place bets with the listeners, everybody out there. Let's all make a plot.
Yeah, but I'm the only one.
It's a kind of thing where it's fun to bet on.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, be sure to check out This Week in Space. You can find us on your favorite podcast app or see the link in the description below. See you there.